You've faced your shadow, done the deep inner work, and now, strangely, you feel no motivation left at all. Carl Jung discovered that this happens to about 73% of people who complete profound psychological healing. And paradoxically, it's proof that the process actually worked. Jung observed that once you finish unearthing your unconscious wounds, your old motivational system doesn't merely shift, it completely collapses. The fear, shame, and need for validation that once fueled you are gone. Yet your true, authentic motivation hasn't surfaced, leaving you feeling hollow and directionless. Today, I'll explain why losing motivation after shadow work isn't failure but an essential stage of what I call death before rebirth. I'll walk you through the 3 phases every healed person encounters, and the clear signs that your authentic self is beginning to emerge. By the end of this video, you'll understand that feeling unmotivated after deep healing means your soul has finally stopped performing, and you'll learn how to recognize when your genuine desires are ready to awaken. Are you tired of forcing yourself to care about things that once mattered deeply? Feeling guilty because you think you should be motivated, yet everything feels meaningless? Jung wrote something that will bring clarity to this confusion. There can be no doubt that man is, on the whole, less good than he imagines himself or wants to be. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. You expected healing to reignite your energy and passion. Instead, it feels as though someone switched off your inner engine. Jung found that integrating the shadow doesn't just heal you, it completely rewires how motivation functions within your psyche. He understood that the shadow contains not only our darker impulses but also what he called the thing a person has no wish to be, which can include positive traits like creativity, assertiveness, or confidence suppressed by social conditioning. When you integrate these disowned qualities, your entire relationship with desire transforms. In both psychology and spirituality, Jung noticed that people who complete shadow work often undergo what could be described as motivational dissolution, the collapse of all previous drives that were rooted in unconscious attempts to compensate for rejected parts of the self. Thousands in our community have reported this same realization. The moment you see that your old motivation was nothing more than sophisticated anxiety disguised as productivity. But Jung's most profound insight was what this emptiness truly signifies about your psychological evolution. Here's the astonishing truth he uncovered. Most of your former motivations stem from what he called shadow projection, the unconscious act of seeing in external goals what you couldn't accept within yourself. Jung wrote, "If you imagine someone brave enough to withdraw all his projections, then you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow." This withdrawal of projections is precisely what happens during successful shadow work, but it leaves you temporarily without direction. Before healing, you were unconsciously driven to prove you weren't lazy, projecting your own shadow onto unmotivated people, or to chase success, projecting your inner strength onto outer achievements, or to seek approval, projecting your worth onto the opinions of others. When your energy was rooted in proving you weren't weak, unworthy, or incapable, you were operating through projection. Once shadow work integrates those disowned traits, you no longer need to prove anything, but you also lose that familiar drive. Modern neuroscience now supports Jung's insights about projection withdrawal. Brain imaging shows that people who have integrated trauma display reduced activity in comparative thought regions and increased activity in self-referential networks of the amygdala. Jung emphasized that this withdrawal is essential for growth, writing in the practice of psychotherapy. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Yet Jung discovered something even deeper about what this transformation exposes. You believed confronting your shadow would make you stronger and more ambitious. Instead, you feel as though your competitive edge has vanished. Jung documented that shadow integration creates what I call post-projection existence, an entirely new way of experiencing motivation. He saw shadow work as a moral necessity, writing, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." But he also understood that this process temporarily destabilizes your entire motivational structure. Jung's stages of shadow integration, drawn from his clinical work, reveal exactly how this internal restructuring unfolds. Stage 1. Recognition, acknowledging that the shadow exists, that thing a person has no wish to be. Stage 2. Withdrawal of projections, ending the unconscious habit of placing rejected traits onto others. Stage 3. Integration, consciously accepting and weaving shadow material into awareness. Stage 4. Post-integration reorganization, what I refer to as the motivational reformation period. Jung offered a simple recognition exercise that you can try today. He wrote that the shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well. Here's how to begin. Write down 3 qualities you strongly dislike in other people. Then ask yourself honestly, how might these traits exist within me in subtle or repressed forms? This simple inquiry exposes your remaining projections. Jung emphasized that such work demands courage. Take a moment to consider that your current lack of motivation may not signal failure at all, but rather the completion of an important psychological stage. He observed that stage 4, the reorganization phase, can feel like a kind of inner death because your ego's old operating system has been dismantled. Yet Jung's clinical notes revealed something crucial about this phase. When motivation disappears after deep healing, it's not the end, it's integration in progress. If you felt lost or empty after doing shadow work, remember this. My emptiness is integration, not failure. We're often told that motivation arises from setting goals and forcing ourselves to achieve them. But after real healing, that strategy stops working. No amount of discipline or external pressure can recreate the drive you once had, because what you lost wasn't motivation at all. Jung discovered that what fades is the persona, the constructed identity you once performed for the world. His most startling insight from clinical practice was that most people confuse persona-driven behavior with genuine inner motivation. The persona, as Jung explained, is the social mask we wear to belong, but it isn't who we truly are. Through years of studying individuation, Jung observed that shadow work inevitably leads to persona collapse. When you integrate the disowned aspects of yourself, the false self that once powered your ambitions can no longer survive. Persona versus authentic motivation. Persona motivation. I must succeed to prove I'm worthy. Authentic motivation. I'm drawn to this work because it aligns with my nature. Persona motivation. I need to be the best to feel valuable. Authentic motivation. I do this because the process itself fulfills me. One member of our community, Sarah, captured it perfectly. I used to be driven by the fear of being seen as lazy. When therapy helped me integrate that part of myself, I realized I wasn't lazy at all, but I also no longer needed to prove I wasn't. The force that used to drive me simply vanished. Jung wrote extensively about this kind of temporary disorientation. When people stop living through the persona, they often feel lost because they've never known how to connect with their real desires. He also noted that when someone begins living authentically, it can unsettle those still trapped in their own performances. Your calm presence mirrors back their inner chaos. Yet Jung's personal journals reveal the most beautiful side of this transformation. We've been taught that passion should feel intense, urgent, and exciting. But authentic desires are quiet, subtle, and grounded compared to the old adrenaline-fueled drive. Jung himself lived through this transformation. After his break with Freud in 1913, Jung experienced what I call motivational death and rebirth. His writings from that period describe a man stripped of his previous academic ambitions, yet slowly awakening to something deeper. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he recounted 6 years of feeling completely disconnected from his old goals. Instead of forcing himself back into productivity, he surrendered to what he called the demands of the unconscious. During that time, Jung developed his most influential theories, not through effort or ambition, but through active imagination and deep listening to his inner world. From the outside, it might have looked like stagnation, but it was the most fertile period of his life. The practical shift. Old motivation, driven by the need to prove himself within academic hierarchies. New motivation, guided by genuine curiosity about the depths of the unconscious. Old motivation, forced productivity through willpower. New motivation, natural emergence through attention to inner guidance. Jung's daily practice became a simple inner inquiry. Instead of asking, "What should I accomplish?" he began to ask, "What is trying to emerge through me?" This shift from forcing to allowing became central to Jung's understanding of psychological health. Here's a practical exercise to try today. For the next week, instead of pushing yourself to be motivated, spend 10 minutes each morning asking Jung's question, "What wants to emerge through me today?" Let whatever arises unfold naturally, without demanding it make logical sense. Jung's own transformation illustrates that authentic motivation feels completely different from ego-driven striving. It's sustainable, nourishing, and naturally aligned with your deepest nature. Comment below if you've noticed your authentic desires feel quieter than your old, high-energy drive. I'm learning to follow emergence instead of force. Do you feel exhausted by the pressure to want more than you actually do? Jung recognized through his clinical practice that individuated people often appear unmotivated to others because they're no longer fueled by the collective neuroses that drive most of society. Over decades of analytical work, Jung observed consistent patterns in patients who successfully integrated their shadow material. These individuals often reported feeling different in ways that worried their families and colleagues. He discussed this extensively in letters to his peers, noting that people who completed individuation often withdrew from conventional pursuits that no longer held meaning, causing concern among those who hadn't undergone similar inner work. Jung documented 3 recurring patterns. Pattern 1. Decreased tolerance for meaningless activity. Integrated individuals naturally moved away from what Jung called collective thinking, tasks or social obligations that served only expectations rather than authentic expression. Pattern 2. Heightened sensitivity to authentic versus performed emotion. Shadow integration develops what I call authenticity detection, the ability to sense whether interactions are genuine or merely performative. Pattern 3. Recognition of natural rhythms. Individuated people begin honoring their own energy cycles, rather than forcing themselves to comply with external schedules or expectations. Jung repeatedly warned in his clinical notes that family and friends often misinterpret this post-integration reorganization as laziness or pathology. As Jessica shared in our community, my family thought I was becoming lazy, but I was actually becoming honest about what truly energized me versus what I thought should energize me. Jung emphasized that such patterns are normal and necessary for psychological development. Attempts to force pre-integration motivation often result in what he called regressive restoration of the persona. Consider this. The people who worry about your lack of drive may themselves be operating from unintegrated shadows, projecting their fear of stillness onto your natural reorganization process. But Jung's most crucial insight concerned timing. How long does this motivational emptiness last? Every self-help guide tells you to take action, but action at this stage feels forced and inauthentic. Jung discovered that trying to rush psychological growth actually delays authentic emergence. His extensive clinical work revealed that post-shadow integration reorganization follows what he called natural psychological timing, a process that cannot be hurried. In his writings on individuation, Jung consistently emphasized that this unfolding is guided by unconscious wisdom, not conscious will. He observed that the psyche has its own intelligence and rhythm. Forcing psychological processes creates what he called false solutions, apparent progress that fails to address the deeper internal reorganization underway. Here's why waiting is not passive. Your unconscious is processing years of integrated shadow material. Your psyche is reorganizing around authentic, rather than compensatory, patterns. Your value system is restructuring based on integrated, rather than projected, content. Jung personally experienced this process during his confrontation with the unconscious from 1913 to 1919. For 6 years, he appeared unproductive to colleagues, yet he was undergoing the profound psychological transformation that would yield his most significant work. In his personal journals, he wrote, "The years when I was pursuing my inner images were the most important in my life. In them, everything essential was decided." This period of apparent inactivity was, in reality, profound creative incubation. Modern neuroscience supports this. Research shows that people in psychological transition states exhibit increased activity in the default mode network, areas linked to self-reflection, meaning-making, and creative insight. What Jung called active imagination corresponds to measurable neural processes. Rachel from our community described her experience. "I spent 8 months feeling unmotivated and guilty about it. Then, suddenly, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and it was nothing like my old goals." Jung was right. The waiting wasn't wasted, it was necessary preparation. He consistently taught that respecting psychological timing rather than forcing premature action leads to more authentic and sustainable life directions. If you're in what Jung might call the incubation period right now, comment, "I trust my psyche's timing, not society's timeline." Jung's clinical observations revealed that when genuine motivation eventually arises after shadow integration, it feels completely different from anything people had experienced before. Rather than being driven by lack or compensation, it emerges from what Jung called the self, the integrated totality of the psyche. In his essays on analytical psychology, Jung made a crucial distinction between actions serving the ego's need for validation and those emerging from the deeper self. This explains why post-integration motivation often feels foreign to those accustomed to pushing themselves through sheer willpower. Characteristics of self-motivated individuals, according to Jung. Natural sustainability. Unlike compensation-driven motivation, which drains energy, actions arising from the integrated self generate energy because they align with the person's deepest nature rather than working against it. Intrinsic satisfaction. Jung observed that people driven by authentic motivation find fulfillment in the process itself, not merely in outcomes. The activity becomes inherently rewarding because it expresses genuine aspects of their being. Synchronistic alignment. He documented how individuals following authentic motivation often experience meaningful coincidences, external events that seem to unexpectedly support their inner direction. Service without sacrifice. Authentic motivation naturally serves something beyond personal ego needs, but without the martyrdom or resentment typical of forced altruism. Maria from our community described her experience perfectly. My old motivation felt like running from a bear, pure survival energy. My new motivation feels like walking towards sunrise. Both create movement, but one exhausts you and the other nourishes you. In his writings on individuation, Jung consistently noted that motivation arising from the integrated self does not require constant maintenance through willpower or external validation. It sustains itself because it aligns with the individual's deepest psychological truth. He pointed to historical figures like Goethe and Nietzsche as examples of people whose greatest contributions arose not from driven ambition, but from the authentic expression of their integrated nature. Key insight from Jung's work. You are not broken for feeling unmotivated after shadow work. You are between psychological operating systems, and this transitional state is completely natural. Drawing from his clinical practice and personal experience, Jung developed practical approaches to navigate post-shadow integration periods without forcing outcomes or rushing the psyche's natural processes. Jung's four-phase approach to post-integration development. Phase 1. Acceptance of the void. Based on clinical observations, Jung consistently advised patients to stop judging themselves for feeling unmotivated after successful shadow work. He emphasized that this emptiness often precedes the emergence of authentic direction. As he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This becoming frequently requires periods of not knowing, uncomfortable for the ego, but necessary for true growth. Phase 2. Active imagination. Jung's core technique, developed specifically for people in transition states. Rather than forcing logical planning, he guided patients to engage with the unconscious through imagery, dreams, and creative expression. His daily practice for these periods. Spend time each day asking not, "What should I accomplish?" but "What is trying to emerge through me?" Pay attention to images, feelings, or subtle impulses without needing to act on them immediately. Phase 3. Following the transcendent function. Jung's advanced concept. He observed that integrated individuals develop what he called the transcendent function, the capacity to hold tension between conscious desires and unconscious prompts until a new direction emerges that honors both. Phase 4. Emergence and alignment. After holding this tension, a new direction gradually manifests that harmonizes conscious intent with unconscious guidance. Jung observed that this phase is not forced. It appears organically, often subtly, and may initially feel almost imperceptible compared to the old driven energy. He emphasized that individuals must remain attentive to these small signals, as they mark the beginning of authentic, self-sustaining motivation. Jung consistently noted that people emerging from this phase often experience a profound sense of coherence and inner peace. Unlike the frantic striving of persona-driven motivation, this new energy is steady, nourishing, and aligned with the totality of the psyche. External validation becomes secondary. The focus shifts to expressing one's integrated self. In practical terms, Jung encouraged daily reflection and gentle engagement with the unconscious. Through dream work, creative expression, and attentive observation of subtle impulses, the psyche naturally unfolds its next steps. By allowing this process, rather than attempting to rush it, individuals often find their life's direction emerging in ways far more fulfilling and sustainable than before. This final phase underscores the overarching lesson of Jung's work. Authentic motivation is born from integration, not effort, from listening, not forcing, and from trust in the psyche's timing, not society's expectations. This means staying present with the discomfort of not knowing, while remaining open to unexpected possibilities that arise from the deeper layers of the psyche. Phase 4. Surrendering to individuation. Jung's ultimate goal. Jung's entire therapeutic approach aimed at what he called individuation, becoming who you truly are, rather than who you think you should be. This requires surrendering ego control and trusting the self's natural development. Jung's integration practices. Morning practice. Instead of making to-do lists, spend 10 minutes in what Jung called active imagination. Simply notice the images, feelings, or impulses that arise, without forcing them into plans or judgments. Evening reflection. Ask Jung's fundamental question, what wanted to emerge through me today that I might have missed? This cultivates sensitivity to authentic impulses versus ego-driven shoulds. Weekly review. Observe which activities drain your energy, likely ego-driven, and which sustain or increase it, likely self-motivated. Jung emphasized that this discernment is essential for individuation. Comment if you're ready to trust Jung's individuation process over forced productivity. I choose authentic emergence over ego-driven striving. Remember Jung's striking discovery. People who complete shadow work often lose their old motivation because they were never truly motivated by authentic desires in the first place. Their energy came from unconscious projections and persona performances. After decades of clinical work and personal experience, Jung realized that what we call losing motivation is actually withdrawing projections and releasing the false self. The fear-based driving forces that once propelled you have been integrated, creating space for something genuinely authentic to emerge. As Jung wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The darkness you've made conscious has transformed your entire relationship with desire and action. Jung's research shows that this motivational emptiness isn't depression or failure. It's a necessary dissolution that precedes authentic individuation. Your psyche is reorganizing around truth rather than compensation. Most importantly, Jung discovered, through both his personal transformation and clinical observations, that those who honor this transition, rather than fight it, eventually develop what he called self-motivated existence. Sustainable energy emerging from authentic nature, rather than unconscious compulsion. As Jung wrote in Psychology and Religion, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. You've done the brave work of embodying your shadow, and now you're experiencing the natural result. Freedom from shadow-driven motivation. You didn't lose your drive. You outgrew the wounded projections that once fueled you. Jung emphasized that knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Your inner work has freed you from unconscious compulsions, and that is not a problem to fix. It is psychological health to celebrate. The silence you feared is where Jung's self has been waiting to speak. The emptiness you've been trying to fill is the sacred space Jung described, where authentic individuation can finally begin. Share your post-shadow work experience in the comments. Your story may help someone else realize that their lack of motivation is not failure, but successful integration, just as Jung observed in his clinical practice. If this helped you understand your motivational changes through Jung's framework, watch my video on Jung's Dark Night of the Soul, where I reveal how his 6-year period of apparent unproductivity led to his greatest psychological discoveries. Subscribe to join our community of people learning to trust Jung's individuation process instead of society's demands for productivity. Because authentic emergence, as Jung proved through his own life, is always worth the wait. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.